My boyfriend still posts on Instagram about surviving an emotionally abusive relationship. He means me. The joke is he's right, and he still has no idea. He loved being the fixer. I showed up depressed, broke, anxious. I leaned hard into it. I cried on command, shook during storms, woke him at 3 a.m. to say I couldn't breathe. He held me, soothed me, fed me all his patience until he ran on fumes. I figured out quick that his whole personality was built for this. He needed a problem he could solve. He needed to feel like the good guy. If I curled in on myself, he stepped closer. If I said I was scared of my own thoughts, he'd sit on the floor with me and talk me through it like he was reading from a manual. He started skipping work lunches because I wasn't doing great today. He stopped seeing his friends because I got overwhelmed when he left. He didn't even resent it at first. He wore it like a medal. And I let him. I made it easy for him to be the hero. I learned what made his voice soften. I learned how to make my hand shake just enough. I learned how to cough and gag a little so my panic sounded real. I'd stare at the ceiling, waiting for his breathing to even out, and then I'd nudge him awake and whisper that I couldn't feel my fingers. He'd bolt upright, heart racing, and then spend an hour calming me down. After, he'd rub my back like we'd survived something together. I watched him get hooked on that feeling. He got tired anyway, because people do. He started saying boundaries. He started asking me not to call him at work unless it was an emergency. The word emergency started to annoy him. I could see it. So I started making emergencies out of normal shit. I'd cry because he didn't text back fast enough. I'd go quiet and let him stew. I'd accuse him of leaving me alone with my head. Then if he snapped, I'd act small and wounded and say his tone scared me. He'd apologize. He'd apologize so much it started sounding like breathing. Then I flipped it. One night, he passed out on the couch with his phone on his chest. His passcode was my birthday. Of course it was. I opened his texts and saw his friends still trying to reach him, still asking if he was alive, still inviting him out like they hadn't learned yet that he'd stopped belonging to them. I felt this hot, stupid jealousy. Not because I wanted to go out, because I wanted him to have nothing. He didn't run through me first. I texted his friend from his phone while he slept, picked fights, called them selfish, told them they only cared when he was fun. I kept the messages short and mean, like a tired guy finally saying what he really thought. One of them replied angry. Another tried to call. I let it ring, muted it, deleted the call log. Then I deleted the whole thread on his end, so he'd never see it. He woke up the next morning like nothing happened, and I watched him scroll, confused, wondering why the group chat felt colder. They drifted exactly the way I needed them to. No big blow-up. Just fewer invites, fewer check-ins, shorter replies. He'd stare at his phone like it betrayed him. He'd ask if he did something. I'd sound like I hated saying it, and tell him maybe they were selfish, maybe they were tired of drama. I'd say while holding his hand like I was on his side. He started leaning on me harder because there wasn't anyone else left to lean on. The sleep meds were next. He took something prescribed. He always followed the label. That made him feel safe, like at least one part of his life came with instructions. I didn't like that he could knock himself out and disappear from me for 8 hours. I didn't like that he could wake up rested and sharper and start noticing things. So I messed with the bottle. Some nights I swapped pills around so he'd take more than he meant to. Other nights I left him short so he'd lie there wired and pissed off, staring at the ceiling while I pretended to sleep. If I needed it fast, I crushed extra into his tea before bed, stirred until it dissolved, watched him blink slow like his brain was buffering. He started waking up confused. He overslept alarms. He missed meetings. He'd stand in the kitchen holding his keys and look at me like he forgot what he was doing. He got late to work so many times his boss warned him twice. After the second warning, he came home pale, like his face forgot how to hold itself up. He kept saying he felt foggy, like he wasn't in his own body. I comforted him. I told him maybe it was stress. Then I pushed the idea I wanted. I told him maybe he had undiagnosed bipolar, like my research suggested. I said it careful, like I didn't want to label him, like I was just worried. I watched him swallow it, because it explained the chaos better than my girlfriend is sabotaging me. He started tracking his moods. He started Googling symptoms at 2 a.m. He started asking me if I thought he was getting worse. I'd pause before answering, like it hurt me to admit it, and then I'd say maybe a little. He tried to leave once. Not break up, just a weekend at his brother's. Space. Sleep. He looked wrecked when he said it, like he was begging permission to breathe. I didn't argue. I didn't throw anything. I shut the bedroom door and made the breathing sounds I practiced, rough and choking like I couldn't get air. I slid down the wall so it thumped loud. I let my hands shake against the carpet. He dropped his bag and came running. He always came running. He held me and whispered that he wasn't going anywhere, and I felt that sick little click in my chest like a lock catching. By then, I was already laying track for the exit. I saved fake scared drafts in my notes with dates, like a diary I was too afraid to keep on paper. I staged photos of small bruises where I'd slammed my own arm into the doorframe. I sent one to my mom with a vague, "I don't want to talk about it." I sent another to a friend with a single line about being tired. People didn't ask questions. They just started looking at him differently in their heads. He got angrier as he unraveled, not because he was a violent guy, because he was exhausted and isolated and convinced something was wrong with his brain. He'd forget what he just said. He'd ask the same question twice. He'd stare at the sink running like he couldn't remember why he turned it on. I kept nudging anyway. I'd correct him. Idésique. I'd tell him his tone scared me. I'd say I didn't recognize him lately. I'd hint that he needed help before he hurt someone. He'd beg me to stop talking sometimes, and I'd keep going because the begging meant I was close. When he snapped and punched the wall next to my head, I'd already set the stage. The sound was loud and ugly, drywall popping. For a second, my body went cold because violence is violence even when it hits plaster. Then the cold flipped into calm. I remember thinking, finally. I hit record the next time we fought, and I pushed him until he screamed himself hoarse. I didn't need cute insults. I just kept dragging him back to the same points. He was sick, he was scary, he was ruining us. He was making me unsafe. I stayed steady while he spiraled. That contrast sells better than any bruise. His voice cracked. He started repeating himself. He started sounding like a guy losing a grip on his own story. After that, I didn't leave right away. I waited long enough to look trapped. I started flinching when he walked into rooms. I slept with my phone under my pillow. I jumped when a cabinet closed hard. I let him apologize until he sounded broken. He promised therapy. He promised anger management. He promised he'd never scare me again. He meant it. That's why it worked. Everyone loves a redemption arc until you show them a monster instead. When I left, I made it look like I ran. I packed while he was at work. I took the basics and left drawers half open like I didn't have time. I drove to my mom's shaking, not from fear of him, but from the buzz in my blood. I played that audio for everyone, family, friends, therapist. I showed the stage photos. I read pieces from my notes like they were proof. Nobody asked what I said before the recording started. Nobody asked why I was always ready to capture him. They just nodded, furious on my behalf, and started writing his name in their head under one word: abuser. I moved out with a chorus of "You're so brave" at my back while he sat alone in an apartment that suddenly felt haunted and wrong. He texted me days later saying the place felt off, like the silence had weight. He said he couldn't sleep because he kept replaying our fights and couldn't remember how they started. I told him he should talk to someone. I told him I hoped he got help. I kept my tone soft like I was above it. He checks in sometimes, apologizes again, calls himself a monster. I type back that I forgive him while I scroll past the folder where I saved the clips and screenshots I engineered to destroy him in case he ever decides to tell his side. Our hospital thinks a serial killer hacked their system once. It was just me being greedy and bored. I'm the ghost in our IT closet. No one remembers my name. They call me computer guy and shove tickets under my door. The closet is a converted storage room by the loading dock. A place that smells like bleach and old cardboard. Fluorescent light, no window, a vent that rattles like it's choking. I sit in there with 2 monitors and a badge that opens more doors than it should. People come in only when something breaks, and they leave like I was never there. Hospital work makes you numb if you let it. You watch the worst days of people's lives scroll by in neat little boxes. Lab values, psych notes, security reports, restraining orders scanned and crooked. Social work writes things nobody says out loud at the desk. Patient fearful. Patient declines police. Boyfriend won't leave room. You read it, you fix the printer, you move on. It's not because you're heartless. It's because if you feel all of it, you won't make it through a shift. I also lurk in some nasty corners of the internet. Not for a noble reason. For the same reason most people do dumb shit. Boredom and money. I wasn't broke, but I was always one surprise away from a disaster. Rent went up. My car kept dying. My credit card stayed maxed. I started with stolen credit cards because it felt distant, like stealing from a cloud. I told myself it was victimless, the way every asshole tells himself. Then some freak in a private forum offered cash for live info. Not identities, he said, just locations. For art projects. I laughed, assumed LARP, and tested him with a random visitor's parking plate and discharge time. I didn't even pick someone vulnerable. I picked an out-of-towner who parked like a dick and made the cameras easy to see. I sent the plate and the time their visitor badge printed and when the patient got discharged because the system spits that out like candy. He paid instantly. No questions. No hositashchen. Just money in my account like I'd sold a piece of air. That little buzz of money hit my brain in the sickest way. I didn't feel fear right away. I felt smart. I felt finally noticed, even if it was by a stranger in a gutter. So I kept doing it. Small stuff. Which door do people use after hours? Where's the Uber pickup? How long does security stay on a standby? The hospital runs on shortcuts, and everybody breaks policy to keep things moving. Doors get propped. Passwords get shared. Cameras don't cover the corners that matter. I knew all of it. I knew it the same way you know the weak spot in a fence you walk past every day. And the forum guy kept nudging me deeper. He'd ask for live like he meant breathing, not data. He wanted timing. He wanted movement. He wanted people who try to hide. Not the loud cases with cops and chaos. The quiet ones. The ones who said, I don't feel safe, and still went home because they had nowhere else. I built a script that scraped certain flags. Domestic violence cases, stalking complaints, anyone with fear for safety in their notes. I'm not going to dress it up. I made it easier to do the wrong thing because doing it by hand started to feel too personal. If a notification popped up and I just forwarded what it grabbed, it felt like I wasn't really involved. Like the machine was the bad guy and I was just sitting there. I sent headlights and exit doors, locker numbers, what color hoodie they wore. I sent discharge times because that's when people step out into the dark parking garage with paper in their hand and relief on their face. The requests got more specific. The girl who came in with a broken wrist, age 19, boyfriend did it. I knew exactly who he meant. I'd reset her MyChart password that morning. I remembered her because she couldn't hold the phone with a splint, and her boyfriend kept hovering, answering for her like he owned her throat. He tried to joke with the nurse, and it came out mean. Security had to tell him to back up when she went to x-ray. Social work wrote the note. Everybody writes. Patient endorses fear for safety. She didn't want police. She wanted to leave. The system did what it always does. It discharged her. When I sent the info, my fingers moved like muscle memory. Time, door where her stuff was locked, the hoodie color because it was in the triage note. I hit send and felt my stomach drop a second later, like my body understood before my head did. When she turned up on the news a week later, missing, last seen leaving our emergency alone, I didn't sleep for 2 days. I watched the security feed until my eyes burned, replaying the last minutes we had of her. Sling on, walking toward the garage, pausing like she wanted to turn around and run back inside. Then she passed behind a concrete pillar and the camera lost her. That was it. A blank patch of frame where anything could happen. The forum cheered. Someone dropped a link to an article with a smile emoji. People joked like it was a meme. My stomach twisted, but my hands still typed. Not because I wanted to, because I didn't know how to stop without admitting what I'd done. Because the money was already in my account. Because I was a coward, and cowards keep feeding the thing that owns them. I started jumping at everything. Every overhead page sounded like my name. Every time security leaned in my doorway and watched my screen, I thought they'd see a thread open, a transaction receipt, something. I snapped at nurses for dumb tickets. I drank before bed just to shut my brain off. I stopped calling my mom back because I couldn't hear a normal voice without wanting to puke. Then, the admin noticed weird traffic. Nothing dramatic, just a report that said my account touched too many charts at weird hours. My manager pulled me in and asked if I'd seen anything strange. He looked tired, like he wanted an answer that let him close the problem and go back to pretending we were safe. I wiped logs, blamed a foreign IP, when the admin noticed weird traffic. We held a whole security training about protecting patient privacy. They played those cheesy videos about phishing and minimum necessary, like the problem is always someone clicking the wrong link. I sat there sweating through my shirt while compliance thanked me for catching it early. They thanked me for catching it early. After that meeting, I went back to my closet and just sat there with my hands flat on the desk like I was trying to pin myself down. A nurse banged on my door about a workstation that wouldn't log in, and I almost screamed at her. I fixed it in 30 seconds, smiling like a professional while my chest hammered. She walked away, and I heard her tell someone, "IT's so dramatic," like I was being a bitch about a printer jam. Security started hanging around more too. Not because they suspected me, but because admin told them to be visible. One of the older guards liked to lean in my doorway and talk about how people are crazy these days, how you can't trust anybody. He said it like small talk, and every time my mouth went dry, I'd nod and keep my eyes on my screen and pray he didn't notice my cursor hovering over places I shouldn't be. The forum guy got bolder once he realized I didn't break. He stopped asking questions and started giving orders with timestamps, like he was dispatch. Patient in triage, protective order. Stalking complaint, female, leaving alone. I'd stare at those messages and think, this is where I stop. Then I'd picture my manager calling me in again, picture handcuffs, picture my life collapsing, and my fingers would move anyway. Every time I sent something, I felt less like a person and more like a cable plugged into a wall. I even typed up an anonymous tip once, a whole shaky paragraph about suspicious access and a user selling info. I sat with my thumb over the send button, and then I deleted it. Coward. Again, the girl stayed missing. Her face lingered in the local news rotation for a while, and then the world did what it does. It moved on. The hospital filled up with new emergencies, new bruises, new broken bones, new people whispering, "Please don't tell him I'm here." The forum moved on too, hunting the next thrill. But I didn't move on. I kept seeing her pause on that camera feed, like she could feel what was waiting outside. Once, months later, I heard her mom's voice without meaning to. She got transferred wrong and landed in our help desk queue, crying into the hold music, asking if the computer record showed anything new. The agent across from me shrugged like it was a weird call and tried to bounce her to patient relations. I sat there frozen, listening to her beg some stranger for crumbs, and my monitor kept popping tickets like nothing in the world had changed. Her mom still calls the hospital and begs for new leads. Sometimes I mute my headset and scroll through old transaction receipts instead, counting how many people I sold for less than what we pay for a fucking MRI. There's a memorial bench at my old middle school with my name on the donor plaque. The kid at honors died because I needed to win one stupid bet. I hadn't been back in years. I drove past the place 100 times, told myself I didn't give a shit, and still avoided turning in. That bench sits by the side field, right where kids cut across to the buses. Same cracked sidewalk, same chain link fence, Same smell of wet dirt and cafeteria grease when the wind hits right. The plaque is tiny, cheap metal, but it might as well be a siren. My name, like I paid for something noble, like I'm allowed to sit there. We tormented him for years. Quiet kid, asthma, thick glasses, always hugged the walls. Teachers called him sensitive, which was basically a target sign. He moved like he was trying not to get noticed by air itself. He kept his backpack straps cinched tight, head down, and he'd flinch when lockers slammed, even if they were 20 feet away. Nobody protected him. Not really. Teachers said, boys will be boys, and just ignore them, and then acted shocked when he couldn't. One fall, our little gang dared each other to make him cry every day for a month. Whoever failed bought everyone else pizza. It was stupid. It was perfect middle school math. Cruelty plus boredom plus peer pressure equals a game. We made a little scoreboard like it was a tournament. We didn't call it bullying. We called it messing with him. Like that made it harmless. If he didn't cry, it didn't count. So we chased the tears like idiots chasing a high. I stole his inhaler first. Simple. Grabbed it from his open backpack during gym and tossed it on top of the locker where he couldn't see. He wheezed the whole period. Teacher blamed seasonal allergies. We laughed until our sides hurt. I could still see him patting his pockets, eyes wide behind those thick lenses, trying not to freak out because freaking out would make it worse. The coach told him to drink water and keep moving, like water fixes lungs. He sat out, bent forward, sucking at air that wouldn't come, and nobody helped him because helping him meant admitting we were doing something. After that, everything turned into a routine. Trip him in the hallway and act offended when he looked back. Knock his books loose and watch him crawl for them while everyone stepped around him. Slide his chair back a few inches so he'd sit and hit the floor. Hide his glasses for a minute, just long enough to make him panic. Get him in trouble for talking when he wasn't. Some days he cried quiet, wiping his face fast like he was ashamed of the evidence. Some days he just went blank, like he'd left his body behind to keep it from getting hurt. Those blank days pissed us off. We took it personal, like he owed us a reaction. The last week of the bet, I panicked. I'd already humiliated him in every way I could think of. I needed something bigger. Pizza sounds dumb now, but back then it was everything. It was the prize and the proof. It meant I didn't go soft, didn't fail in front of the guys. And I was terrified of being the one who failed, because in middle school, failing one thing turns into failing everything. You become the next target. So I told him after school that the popular kids felt bad and wanted to hang out by the drainage tunnel behind the field. I told him to come alone so it wouldn't be awkward. I fed him hope like it was candy. I watched his face change when I said it, like he'd been starving and I'd offered food. He nodded too fast. He even tried to smile. It makes me sick thinking about how hard he worked to believe me. We watched from the trees. He actually showed. Backpack tied on both shoulders, new hoodie, hope all over his stupid face. Rain started, the kind that turns the ground slick in seconds. He stepped down the bank, looking toward the tunnel like he expected friends to step out laughing and welcoming him. His shoe slid on the mud. He windmilled his arms, tried to catch himself, and went down hard. Not a dramatic fall, just fast and ugly. He tumbled right into the black water. His shout cut off like someone hit mute. For a second we froze. Then someone snorted. Someone said he'd come out smelling like sewer. I laughed too, because my brain kept trying to force it back into a joke. We waited for him to pop up, sputtering, furious, alive. He didn't. The water pulled into the tunnel, and the tunnel just swallowed the sound. There was nothing but rain and that steady rushing noise like the place was eating. One of the guys wanted to go check. I grabbed his arm and said he'd just run home another way. I said it quick, like I was annoyed he'd even ask. The truth was I was terrified. If we went down there and he was hurt, then it was real. If a teacher found us, it was real. If the cops came, it was real. I told myself he was faking, hiding, trying to get us in trouble. My friend pulled at my grip, cussing at me, saying we had to look. I shoved him back against a tree and told him to stop being a little bitch and think. We argued hard right there in the wet leaves, voices sharp, hands shoving, and the whole time that tunnel stayed quiet. I remember the look on his face when he realized I wasn't scared for the kid. I was scared for me. I won. We left. I went home soaked. I ate dinner like a normal kid. My mom asked why my shoes were muddy, and I lied without blinking. That night, I kept hearing the splash in my head, over and over like a skipped track. I kept seeing the moment his hands slapped at the surface and then vanished. I told myself he'd climbed out somewhere else. I told myself he'd gone home and was crying in his room, and tomorrow we'd laugh about how dramatic he was. I needed that lie. I slept like shit and woke up with my heart hammering, already trying to build the next lie before anyone even asked. They found his body wedged against a grate the next day. Accidental drowning. Counselors handed out pamphlets. Parents sobbed. We sat in a circle and shared memories. I lied through my teeth about how kind he was. The principal's voice shook on the announcements. Kids whispered like it was gossip. Teachers looked at us like they were seeing the hallway for the first time. A cop stood by the office, and I almost pissed myself. When they asked if I'd seen him after school, I said no. My voice stayed steady. That's what scares me most. Not that I lied clean. They walked classes past a field later for closure, like pointing at the tunnel could fix anything. I stood in that line with my hands in my pockets, staring at the dark opening, watching rainwater still trickle, and I felt my throat tighten. One of my friends muttered, barely moving his lips, that we were screwed. Another told him to shut up. I kept my face blank because I didn't trust it. I kept thinking about the second my hand clamped on that arm and stopped him. That tiny movement, that tiny choice, and then the rest of my life. At lunch, kids who'd laughed at him all year suddenly acted sad. They posted about him online like they'd been friends. Somebody taped flowers to his locker. His mom came in once, eyes swollen, holding herself together with pure will. I couldn't look at her. I kept my head down and moved fast, like if I walked quick enough I could outrun what I'd done. The bet died without anyone admitting it existed. Nobody bought pizza. Nobody joked about points. We just avoided each other because every time we made eye contact, it felt like the tunnel opening again. One of the guys started skipping school. Another started acting extra loud, like noise could smother guilt. The one who tried to go check hated me after that. He didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in his face. I hated him back for wanting to be decent, because decency made my choice look even worse. On the bus one day, he shoulder-checked me on purpose, hard, and when I turned, he just stared like he wanted to swing. We didn't fight. We both knew what a fight might drag up. We swallowed it and kept rotting quietly. My mom donated for that bench. She wanted me to heal. She saw me quiet, saw me jumpy, assumed it was grief. I let her. I watched her write the check at the kitchen counter, talking about doing something positive, and I didn't stop her. I didn't tell her my name didn't belong anywhere near that kid. When the bench went in and my name showed up on the plaque, people thanked my mom. A teacher told her she was raising a good young man. I stood there smiling like a little liar while my stomach twisted. I tell myself I was a kid. I tell myself kids do dumb, cruel shit. It doesn't matter. I made a choice in the rain, and it didn't just follow me, it built itself into me. I can act normal. I can laugh. I can do my job. But sometimes I'm back there, hearing that rushing sound, feeling my hand on my friend's arm, stopping him from doing the one thing that could have saved a life. That's the moment that owns me. Sometimes I visit, sit on the wood, and stare at the tunnel entrance. I still hear the splash when I try to sleep. I still see the moment we decided our bet mattered more than one gasping, terrified kid in the dark.